the history we're all taught in school or the history we see in the media, it's often presented as this flat timeline, right? It's just a
Yeah,
series of disconnected events.
exactly. But it's not. It's really a living tapestry woven with countless threads of identity and culture.
So what happens when some of those foundational threads, I'm thinking specifically about the central contributions of African civilizations, are systematically cut out or just erased?
Well, that is the core conflict we're going to unpack for you today.
Yeah.
Our sources call this distortion his story, the dominant, usually Eurocentric narrative.
This story.
Right. And it has, for centuries, obscured the authentic narrative of African peoples, which the sources term our story. And this isn't just, an academic footnote. It's a systemic process. It fundamentally impacts identity, cultural pride, even our global understanding of where we all come from.
So our mission for this deep dive is, well, it's ambitious. We're trying to engage in an act of remembrance, but also empowerment for you. We need to understand three things, really. First, the deep roots of African civilization. Second, the specific ways these stories were hidden. And finally, the modern movements that are working to reclaim this history.
Precisely. And we're going to begin where the sources insist we have to, at the absolute foundation of our story, the cradle.
Okay, let's unpack the idea Eden then, because according to many African traditions, the sources say the divine creator and the very concept of Eden, humanity's birthplace, is rooted firmly within the African continent. This isn't just a theory, is it?
No, it's geography. It's locating the sacred in the tangible world. And what's fascinating is how sharply this contrasts with Western interpretations, which, have historically tried to place Eden somewhere else entirely.
Anywhere but Africa.
Anywhere but Africa. In our story, Eden isn't some distant myth. It's a real, tangible cradle of civilization, often placed right along the continent's most fertile lands like near the Great Lakes or the banks of the Nile.
I can see the immediate implications of that. If the spiritual origins of humanity are rooted in Africa, it gives the continent this spiritual and cultural primacy that's almost always ignored in mainstream accounts. It just changes the whole starting point.
It does. It completely reframes the story. It affirms Africa not just as the birthplace of, say, human anatomy, but of human wisdom, of spiritual depth. And this philosophical foundation is crucial because it leads directly to the core ethical blueprint that shaped these early societies.
And that blueprint, that guiding principle, is Maat. We hear that term a lot, but what did it actually look like? It's more than just a vague idea of goodness.
Yeah, much more. Ma is the foundational principle. The African traditions recognize the divine creator as the source of cosmic universal order. Ma is the earthly manifestation of that order. It's truth, balance, harmony, justice, all of it.
So it's less a religious law and more
an ethical operating system for society. That's a perfect way to put it.
So how do they translate that cosmic order into, say, daily life or governance?
It was integrated into everything. In the judicial system of Kemet, for instance, a judge was supposed to embody Ma'at. Trials weren't just about punishment. They were about restoring balance and truth.
Okay.
You even see it in things like the negative confession, where the deceased would state all the things they hadn't done against Marat, like, I have not caused sorrow, or I have not denied food to the hungry. It demanded personal accountability.
That's a structural framework.
Yeah.
It's designed to prevent the very abuses of power that cause empires to collapse. So if Maat is the standard, then the historical journey of African civilization isn't a series of isolated events.
No, it's a continuum. It's a vibrant flow, all built on that shared spiritual wisdom, which is exactly the part that mainstream history so often cuts apart or just ignores.
So let's trace that continuum. Where do we begin?
We begin with the precursor state, Seti, around 3500 BCE. This is the earliest known kingdom in the Nile Valley. And it matters so much because it was the incubator. It laid the groundwork for everything that came next: advanced social organization, metallurgy, religious traditions.
So Seti is chapter 1, even before ancient Egypt. The sources call it the land of the bow. That suggests a pretty organized, militarily capable state.
Absolutely. The land of the bow was known for its skilled archers, its military strength. This was a sophisticated society long before others in the area. And crucially, it developed those core concepts of divine kingship and centralized rule that flowed directly north into the next great chapter. Kemet?
Kemet, ancient Egypt. This is where most people jump in, but they miss that foundation from Seti. Kemet is presented as the absolute zenith of African civilization's global influence.
It is. It's the ultimate showcase of Maat meeting technological genius. Kemet gave the world Medu Nader.
What we call hieroglyphics.
Exactly. And this wasn't just pretty pictures. It was a complex system for governance, for administration, for keeping precise records.
And when you look at the architecture, the pyramids, the temples, we usually just focus on the massive scale. But the sources remind us this wasn't just brute force.
Not at all. It reflects an incredibly advanced understanding of engineering, geometry, astronomy. Many of these structures are precisely aligned with celestial events, which again underscores that commitment to cosmic order. They were literally inscribing their philosophy onto the landscape.
That's vital context. But if mainstream history focuses only on Kemet, it fails to show the continuity south of it, which is the heart of our story. The narrative needs to flow from Kemet to Nubia.
And that relationship is complex.
Yeah.
It proves this wasn't a static world. Nubia, to the south, was both a cultural partner and at times a rival to Kemet. They traded, they fought, they borrowed from one another. It was dynamic.
So what were Nubia's distinct contributions? What made it a powerhouse in its own right?
The Nubians were renowned for exceptional artistry, their huge gold resources, and they developed their own unique architectural styles. I mean, if you look at the pyramids in Meroe, they're different from those in Kemet, smaller, steeper. It shows local adaptation evolution.
So not just one kingdom, but a whole connected, vibrant region.
A whole legacy. And that interconnectedness really culminates with the rise of Kush, which grew from those Nubian roots. And that brings us to one of the most powerful and often ignored narratives, the Black Pharaohs.
This is where the power structure really comes full circle.
Completely. Kush reached its peak of power in the first millennium BCE. The Kushite rulers, these Black Pharaohs, became so dominant that they eventually conquered and governed both Nubia and Kemet.
For nearly a century, right? That really underscores the political power of these African monarchies over the entire region.
It does. And you have to ask, is the memory of that Kushite rule, the power flowing from the south to govern the whole Nile Valley, is that a story mainstream history finds inconvenient?
It has to be. It completely challenges the later colonial framing of Africa.
It's the inconvenient truth. The sources emphasize that the legacy of Kush, their art, their language, their resilient governance, it all remained vital long after external conquest pushed them back out of Egypt. This whole odyssey to Seti, Kemet, Nubia, Kush is so rarely told in its entirety. And that break brings us to the next difficult topic.
Which is, if this history is so foundational, so continuous, why don't we know it? Why isn't it celebrated? This can't just be an accident or an oversight.
It's not. We're talking about the systemic mechanisms of erasure. The sources describe deliberate methods, both overt and subtle. And it really began with colonial historiography, the way colonial powers wrote history.
What did that actually look like? How did they do it?
They systematically downplayed the complexity and agency of African civilizations. I mean, if you're preparing to conquer a people, you can't simultaneously admit they established the foundations of governance and architecture millennia ago.
Yeah.
So the historical accounts became weapons.
Yeah.
African civilizations were rebranded. They were either primitive, meaning they couldn't progress, or derivative, meaning any great achievement they did have must have come from somewhere else.
That reframing is such a powerful tool. You define a sophisticated civilization as primitive, and it psychologically justifies, well, everything that comes next.
And that leads directly to the cultural tools of erasure we still see. It's the perpetuation of stereotypes in textbooks, museums, media. It relegates Africa to a passive backdrop where history just happens to people rather than being initiated by them.
That's the subtle damage, making these contributions seem anonymous or external. Do the sources give any specific examples of this kind of intellectual theft?
Oh, absolutely. Look at mathematics and astronomy. The early development of complex mathematical systems in Kemet, it's consistently recast. It's often attributed to later Greek philosophers or just labeled ancient knowledge.
So you strip the origin.
You strip the origin, and you strip the credit and the cultural connection. Makes it seem like these complex ideas just appeared out of nowhere somewhere else, allowing other cultures to claim the foundational innovations of African thought.
Exactly.
And the result of all of this, the colonial reframing, the stereotypes, the appropriation, is what the source material calls global amnesia. And this amnesia doesn't just obscure the past, it actively undermines the confidence and aspirations of future generations.
That's a heavy realization. The real cost of that erasure, it makes the question of, so what now? Incredibly urgent. This isn't just about the past, it's linked to social and political movements happening today.
It absolutely connects to the bigger picture, to the battle for narrative control. The fight for history is a fight for the future. We see this in initiatives described in the source material. like Project 2025.
We should define that for our listeners. The sources mention Project 2025 as a modern movement, but what's its specific goal here?
The sources describe it as a growing commitment to challenge the dominant his story. It advocates specifically for educational reform, cultural revival, and community empowerment rooted in African perspectives.
So it's about systemic change in the curriculum.
Exactly. It's about ensuring this comprehensive history, Seti, Kemet, Nubia, Kush, is taught as the continuum it always was.
And that's where the real power shift happens, right? By changing the narratives that shape young minds. It's a shift from waiting for acknowledgement to actively affirming your own self-knowledge.
It's empowerment through knowledge. When you, the listener, understand the history of Ma'at as an ethical code, or the immense power of the Kushite Black Pharaohs, you connect with a heritage that affirms these incredible philosophical and technological foundations.
And here's where we have an edge today. We are no longer solely dependent on the textbooks produced during that colonial era.
That's the key. The digital age is an amplifier. Grassroots storytelling, independent research, digital access to alternative histories, it's all ensuring this erasure is being challenged in real time. We're seeing a decentralization of the historical narrative.
And that accessibility is crucial for shaping a more inclusive, more truthful future. It ensures that future is shaped by truth, not by systemic omission.
Ultimately, this deep dive really shows us that countering the erasure of our story it's much more than an academic exercise. It's a profound act of collective healing, of self-determination. It's about honoring the fullness of the entire human journey.
Absolutely. We traced the divine foundation in Africa, followed the continuum from Seti to the power of the Kushite Black Pharaohs, and confronted the mechanisms that tried to bury that truth. It's a powerful story of resilience.
And we noted that the legacy of those Kushite rulers remained vital long after any external conquests. Their art, their language, and especially their systems of governance persisted. They built institutions designed to last.
So, for you, our listener, here is a final thought to take away. Given that sustained resilience shown by Kush, what specific principles of their culture or their decentralized governance systems, which the source says remain vital, could be studied and applied today to build resilient, enduring cultural and political institutions in your own community? Institutions that are resistant to external attempts at historical or cultural erasure. Think about that continuity.